So, well done if you just finished the Unit 3 Project Management exam. How did you find it? Was it a bit stressful? Let me know in the comments below. I hope it wasn't too bad. I have put together, so we're going to go through the Unit Part A paper, because I don't know if you're like me, but I always like to talk to my mates or talk to people afterwards. I've done an exam, find out what they answered and what did they put down. Did I get it right? There is a right and a wrong answer, so to speak, but there isn't as well with this exam, as long as you can justify it. Obviously, you know, if you're just making up numbers or whatever, then it's not going to be right. So, but let's look at the grade boundary. So, Unit 3, Project Management, what do you need to pass? You need 19 points. 33 for merit, and above 48 you get a distinction. The max you can get is 66. 36 marks go for the PID and Gantt chart. 36 marks, yeah, PID and Gantt chart. PID has 22 marks, so and the Gantt chart and costing resources have 14. And then in the second part, 30 marks for the email checkpoint, 22 for the email, heavily weighted for the email, and 8 for the checkpoint. So, you know, if you didn't do so well on this part, you could pick up the marks on that part to at least get, you know, your pass, just 19 marks. But if you did well on that and well on that, then obviously, you know, you're going to get into the merit and distinction grades, hopefully. So I put this grade boundaries thing in the folder. You can find it in the Google Drive. And let's have a look at part A. So I'm just going to read through my answers, and I've looked at some of my students' answers as well. And I obviously, during the exam week, you're not allowed to talk about these things, even with your friends. Like, it's actually not allowed. I expect some of you probably do, but I, for example, would not be able to post this video while the exam is live. But because this is being posted on a Friday morning, both papers have been done across the country, so we can break it down. So what was the whole scenario about? Well, Neomy or something, sounds like a Japanese bank, Neomy Bank, right? They want to upgrade their systems to make them more efficient. They want people to have fingerprint scanners. They need a much faster, high-speed network, self-service check-in points for people to get their money out and check their balances. They want to, but they also want to make sure that the systems are more secure, don't they? So they want to install CCTV, and so that if there is a problem, that they can investigate fraud quicker. These are the business aims: investigate fraud and reduce customer waiting times, and reduce fraud. So, you know, just overall make banking better for the customers and better for them as well, because they're not going to lose money, and customers are not going to get defrauded. So that is the whole point of this system. Let's jump straight into the project initiation document then. So these are my answers. So, you know, perhaps I shouldn't admit this, but I'm not going to get everything 100% right. I'm a human too, so are your teachers. So you might disagree with some of the things I put down here. So I'm not saying this is definitely the right answer. You might have thought of something I haven't thought of, or done something in a different order that makes more sense. So yeah, well, the first part is easy. I actually, when I costed it up and did my timescales, I actually managed to get it to finish on the 19th. I know some people went over. I doubled up on certain tasks, for example, on the software tasks, and I costed it in at 281,000. Someone said to me after the exam today, because if you've done part A and B, you remember that there was a delay, there was a problem with delivering of cables, and those fibre optic cables, if we jumped straight to the materials, those fibre optic cables here, fibre optics, were 0.49 per metre. What did I say that cost? We can just jump around and look at everything now, because we're post-mortem analysing. 25,000, 26,000. So if they've ordered the wrong cables and they need to get different ones, one answer someone said was that you should add on another 26,000. Now, if you justify that and say that they didn't actually say that in the checkpoint issues, but that could be a reasonable thing to think. And that would add on an extra cost and maybe make you go over budget. So as long as you explain that to them, maybe the examiner will think, well, yeah, that was an interesting insight, and you'll get marks for it. So yeah, so the first thing's easy, dates, distribution, document details, we're approving, Mr. Newbrook approves it, distribute it to him. That's all I said, and I do that on the start of the project, or you could do that just before the start. And then we've got the project initiation, the project aims, sorry. These are obviously the, well, obviously or not obviously, but these are the things that always come on the first page. So, you know, what are we trying to achieve from the system? I usually think these are the aims, the first two things, these are, and then these are the business goals. Right, so allowing customers to log in to the system, use their fingerprint, provide customers secure access, improve security, reduce fraud. They are the aims of the project, right? And then project management and control. So what things did I discuss here? Well, I wanted to make sure that all the staff were utilised, right, on the project, so no one's overworked. So that's the first thing. I talked about staffing. I also wanted to assign the correct staff to different projects, right? I also wanted to make sure that that I spent a lot of time planning my assumptions, constraints, and risks. Why? Because the more of these you imagine, the better you are when you come across these issues, and you have contingency plans. So it's all about thinking about risk and contingency plans projects, really, I think. Also, testing. Hardware and software testing. I've said that as a good project manager, I want the highest ISO standards, so we don't get issues further down the line. You know, how you organise your teams. Do you have peer review of software? Do you work developers with pair programming? Also, I said that I ordered backup system. Well, that is actually one of the materials. So I'm literally just taking everything from this scenario. Look, we ordered the backup system. So I'm saying that's something I did as a project manager, even though they gave that to me. I ordered the backup system so that if it went down, I said something about if there were delivery issues, but I guess that didn't really help here. But basically, if it goes down, I want to make sure that the system works. Also, communication. I talked about my communication. That's important because I want to hear from senior engineers about staff, and I also want to be part of the all hands stand-up meeting in the morning, so I can meet the junior and senior engineers, so I know what they're doing, and they can tell me about their work, and I can unblock them. So talking about risk, communication, how you use staff, and etc. Right? Background to proposed work. I know I've said before you need to list all the tasks, but I actually think that's too much. I think it's simpler. I've basically gone along and I talked about the number of function points, what are complex, what are not, what's the total budget, when I started and when I finished, and the cost of the materials. Now, there's nothing wrong with also just putting a list of the tasks that you've got to do. For example, you could put these things. These are like the deliverables, aren't they? I'll just screenshot that and put it in there, I think. There's nothing wrong with saying that as well, but I think that, so just say, we want to deliver these things. That's just a background to what we want to do, but you don't want to make it too complicated because the SMART targets are where you want to put a little bit more detail. That's where you want to put dates, costs for individual tasks, right? Purpose of the project, again, easy. I've actually wrote my own sentence on that from what I read, just about customers being able to log in and manage their bank accounts with fingerprints, the bank reducing fraud and increasing efficiency. Then responsibilities, they are just a list of the tasks that every single developer and engineer can do. Easy, copy and paste. Materials, again, that's just, they were very simple this time. There were a couple where I had to do a bit of maths, like 5,000 self-service checkpoints times 4, so 20,000. 0.49 per meter, so times 4,000 meant that that would have cost me 25,000. So if you said 0.49 for all the cables, you didn't read it right. But, don't worry. And that is the total of all my resources. Actually, no, that's the total of all my resources. Small mistake there. That's the total of my entire project. So if I just paste that in there, that's my resources total. My tasks were 70,000. My resources costing me that much. Some people got different figures, as I said, but as long as you've justified it, you probably use different resources on different tasks. Maybe I just use cheaper ones. Now, you could say that's better, but you could also argue that using more expensive resources means you've got a higher quality if you use those senior engineers. And whereas I used a lot of junior ones. Now, that kept the cost low, but who knows how that would affect the quality. So then we get on to smart targets. Again, as I said, I've talked about this before, you literally list all the tasks, right? So I've got all the tasks here. The integrating the current systems, configuring the security protocols, etc., and that's a copy and paste job. What isn't a copy and paste? And then I've gone and copied and pasted in also once I've created my Gantt chart. So I started doing my PID, filled in as much as I could, and then I went on and did the Gantt chart. Because as you're reading it, you can extract a lot of information. And I've literally just copied out the dates and who's working on it from my Gantt chart and put them in here. I could have made this a little bit better. I could have put the costs as well. But it does say date and comment, but it would be good to put cost. There's nothing wrong with that. But really, they just want to see when the task is going to start, when it's going to finish. This is really useful, this table, as I realised, when you come onto the checkpoint, because when on the checkpoint, I push some things forward by 5 days because of the delay in delivery or the fibre optic cable issue. And that actually had a knock-on effect for some of the other tasks because they had engineers doing other things. So it pushed some of the other things forward. So when you do that, you can then say it was meant to finish on this date, but because of that knock-on effect, it finished on that date. So there's more detail there about how tasks got moved around. Scope, again, is just a list of deliverables. You don't want to produce anything outside of that. Business case, again, you take from the beginning of that. Then we get onto assumptions and risks. Now, I saw some quite interesting answers from, some people told me some interesting things that they said. For example, assumptions. All of these business cases could be assumptions, easy business cases to put in. We're going to assume that it's going to reduce fraud, improve security, reduce time taken. So if you can't think of anything, put those in. They've already given you them. But I think the main things that you can think we're assuming is that staff are always going to be there on time. They're not going to be sick. That the hardware will work first time, for example. There's not going to be any bugs. The software will work first time. There's not going to be any bugs. But comments are, we make sure that everything's tested well. If the staff are there, we're going to make sure that they're covered. Assume that cloud systems will work. Again, that comes down to testing. And say which one of the engineers would validate whether that assumption was real or not. And their status is their status in the project. So I'm the project manager, validated by Ben Smith. My status is project manager. So have a look through these answers. They're in the link below in the folder, as always, and see what you think about it. Did you think of anything new? Is this good enough? Tell me in the comments below. Constraints. So what are the constraints? The constraints are the number of staff we have is limited. So we only have, if you look at this table, this project management team organizational structure, we've got 3 teams: software, cloud, and network. There's only 1 senior and 1 junior on each. Now that's definitely something that could be a risk or a constraint as well. We're constrained by the number of staff. We're constrained by our budget, and and that means we need to make sure that we allocate tasks carefully and reduce the costs. We're constrained by the long testing time, and that may push the deadlines over. We're constrained by the number of staff we have. We're constrained by only having one supplier, because as what actually happened, we got the wrong thing delivered. Although that wasn't a delivery issue in terms of there being supply problems, it was a problem with who ordered what. So that all builds up to risk. When I answered this, I actually jumped straight to the risks, because I just sort of find it easier to just think about the risks immediately. Assumptions to constraints are risks, so sometimes I find it hard to distinguish why I have to do a separate table, but that's what they want. But the risks are very clear to me. Staff being sick. Now I put 3 out of 3 for probability. That's more than likely to happen. 2 will impact it. 6 severity, 3 times 2. So, and I said, what's my contingency plan? Well, I explained the situation, only one junior and senior per team. But if the junior is sick, senior could step in, but not the other way round. So we might have to hire contractors. So that was materials not being delivered on time. Possible, quite high impact, so severity is 4. We need to have an extra supplier perhaps. We can order the same things from, or order multiple things, but that could be wasteful or something, I said. Other risks, there being unforeseen faults, right? More likely to happen. 3, impact. 2, 6, overall impact on the project, severity on the project. How do we mitigate against that? Well, in every scenario, there's always, so if I can just get to the next page, that's the next document. Right, I scanned this and it's kind of gone backwards. So I don't think it's done it double-sided. Oh, that's annoying. Okay, I've actually got a text version of this as well. But yeah, unforeseen faults. So what I'm about to say is you always get major and minor faults you have to build in. They often add up to a lot of extra testing time and quite a high amount of cost. Like if you look at it here in my little major minor fault calculation, it was 240 extra hours for extra software and testing time. That's quite a lot of cost and testing time, right? So, but because of that, those unforeseen faults are not going to affect things. Having high testing standards to find those faults and then building in the time to fix them is really important. So that's how we mitigate against this. And the same thing I said for hardware as well, so hardware and software. Risk of going over budget, more than possible, staff are sick or there's delays or something, and we have to hire in, we have to put a more expensive resource on a task. Yeah, so those are risks. Really think and spend time thinking about those. So what do you think? What risks did you get? Let me know in the comments. Deliverables. Deliverables are things like installation of, let's see if I can open up the part A scenario. Installation of high-speed network infrastructure. So these are not the tasks, they are the things that you said you want to deliver. So the tasks are then a breakdown of these. So what I've done is, that's the deliverable, and then I've looked at the materials that I've got and I said, which materials do I need to make this happen? So I said high-speed network infrastructure, fibre optics. I said how much it's going to cost, and I said why do we need it? So that that's a really good extra thing to have in there, the cost of that. So configuring of self-service checkpoints. Well, we need the self-service checkpoints. Why do we need it? Customers access their money. Installation of a backup system. So a server or something to back this whole thing up. 20,000. Installation of CCTV, 111,000. Why do we need it? To stop fraud and make it easy to investigate so the bank loses less money. And then integrating the systems and self-service. So it costs 2,000. Stakeholders. I actually went into quite a lot of detail here. Everyone's a stakeholder. So I put in manager director, senior software, senior cloud DevOps, senior network, and then the junior. And the reason I did that was because there wasn't that many. I suppose one thing I did miss out is me, the project manager. That's really important. Put all those in. Then easy mark. Some people accidentally miss it out. Put a picture of the organizational structure. And then you've got the communication plan. The last thing, who are you going to communicate with? Well, here I did group people together. So I said, the managing director, I want to see him maybe once every 2 weeks. Now I put the same type of communication with all of them, but the purpose of that is different. With the managing director, it's to keep him updated. With the senior engineers, it's to meet them in a stand-up in the morning, but also have detailed meetings with them about junior developers. And the junior engineers, it's about meeting them every day to understand any issues they've got. So as a project manager, I can unblock them. So that's the PID. Hopefully you got a lot of that or more than that in there. So the Gantt chart. This is my Gantt chart. I'm not going to demonstrate how to do this, but I'll just run through it quickly. So the first, a lot of the tasks, like you've got to think on your feet a bit here, and you've got to think, where would that task come in the project? Would it come at the beginning? Would it come at the end? Does something else need to happen before it? So for example, creating a test plan has got to come before you do the testing. So creating a test plan for hardware has to come before the hardware testing. There's a slight mistake there, isn't there? Need to move that on. You can drag that on. But yeah, you've got to put so either move that back, but then you get clashes, you see. So I'm just going to undo all that. But yeah, creating a test plan has to come before you do the actual testing. Same for software. Creating a test plan for software comes before you do that. A lot of the tasks I felt could start at the beginning. I felt I tried to start software testing as early as I could. Now, as long as you can justify it, like some people might say, oh, you got to finish all the tasks to do with software before you start software testing. Yeah, but also if you do that, I found that I was going over the end of the project. And actually, I think that if you can justify it and say, well, I started software testing in the, as soon as the resources were available, because there would have been parts of the system that were developed that could be tested, So what else? I think the major things here were, if you look at the number of hours of testing. So let's have a look here. In my separate Excel document, hardware testing and software testing, it was 40 days. I actually ended up, because it was 80 days, right? I had 80 total days here. No, 162. Let's just find out the right one. Yeah. So make that a bit smaller so I can see everything on one screen. The software and the software testing, it came to included in the original software testing, adding that on. What did they actually say for the software and how many faults was it? It was 2 major and 8 minor. 2 major, 8 minor. Now, I assume that there would be 2 major and 8 minor for both the software and the hardware, right? So it was 240 hours for each, right? In the last year's paper, they actually said there were softwares and hardware faults found, like so 6 software faults, 8 hardware faults, right? They haven't said that here, so I'm just going to assume that we're going to find that number of faults for both software and hardware, and I've added on that to the original hours. I've added on 240. But because that task is so long, I split it. And the only people who were available on my Gantt chart were for the hardware testing and who could do it were the junior and senior network engineers. And the only people who were available were for software testing were the junior dev ops and junior software. So I split that task between two. So that meant that they both took on half of the hours. So 120 hours extra each. 120 hours extra is about 4 or 5 days extra instead of spending 10 days each, which would end up pushing them over the project. Because if you look on the Gantt chart, for example, software, this guy here, the senior, so I need to move him here actually, and yeah, basically the yeah, basically that's the end of the project. The senior and the junior network engineer are kept very busy on my project. So if we go to resource overview, you can see junior network and senior network are the most hardworking people on my project. They've got the most number of tasks, which is something I talked about in the checkpoint. And you should mitigate for in future, like basically not allowing that to happen. So by having extra engineers. But if we hadn't split that task and just a junior done it, would have gone way over, right? It would have gone into maybe May or whatever. Obviously, putting a senior engineer onto a testing task is quite expensive. So if I go to task cost overview, now I've done a bit of a, like, you know, what do you call it, blinged up, like task cost overview here. I actually spent quite a bit of time on that, like manually putting in the costs because I've separated out the resources, the material resources into a different group. So I had to add them in. But so go and have a look through this and see how I did it. But you can see here, if we look at the costs, hardware testing, so 120 hours hardware testing with the senior was almost 8,000, 7,600. But with the junior, it's half that. So you are incurring a much bigger cost. And my project actually went over. Actually, no, it didn't go over in the end, did it? I was still under 350,000. So for those of you who did get over like the budget, how did you manage that? What was the most expensive thing? Have a look at my resources. Can you see the fault? Let me know in the comments. Yeah, so it was about doubling up on the testing tasks for me, really. But when I had different, like a junior and a senior get paid a different rate of pay. So that's going to mean you need to do a separate calculation. So let's have a look at that. Look, I've given the junior network engineer 120 hours, senior network engineer 120 hours, but his is 55 and his is 23. So I calculated that cost separately. You can't, if all the engineers on it were, like if I put a load of junior engineers on it and they were all at the same rate of pay, you could just divide the number of hours and you wouldn't have to do a different cost calculation. Because they would, you just take the original cost and divide it between 4. So, and then it would take less time as well. So, yeah, that's my costings and my Gantt chart. What else can I say about this? Task cost overview. Again, as I said, I really wanted to put a little bit of extra detail in here. So this was the distribution of all the tasks. I did a nice graph for that. Then I did a distribution of all the materials as well. so they could see how much and I did a little table and the total. I actually manually put that in as a text field. Also, I couldn't work out how to get a total cost of the project, so I manually wrote that in. But really they're just looking for a list of the costs of all individual tasks. And then, but then I thought I'd want a list of all the individual material costs, but then I couldn't work out how to make it calculate it, so I actually just wrote that in. And the other report, of course, was the resource overview, which was this. So you can see who's done the most work, who's done the least work. The project manager did the least work, but then he's only working 1 day a week. It's not that he's lazy. So, and then a little breakdown, that's what they're looking for. And then obviously the Gantt chart, as I showed you how to do in previous videos, you need to export that, showing as much of the detail as you can on here, and then all the bars over here to show who's working on what when, right? So that's the PID in the Gantt chart. So how did you think you did? I'll put timestamps in this video so you don't have to listen to everything. You can jump to the bit you want. Right, so firing on. Part B, email and checkpoint. This is what you would have done yesterday, because I'm going to post this video on Friday morning. Part B scenario. Essentially, this was it. It was, there was a problem with the fingerprint sensors not reading correctly. So that's an issue with security protocols. So that would be a software issue. So that would affect some of the software development tasks. That's what I thought. Let's look at the Gantt chart again. So configuring security protocols, I think it would have affected that. It would have affected probably just that I said. And what's important here is when you're writing out the checkpoint. So you fill in all these details here. I actually, in this products table, you write all the deliverables, all the things that you wanted to deliver. And then you have to figure out which checkpoints issue is going to affect which product. I found that a little bit difficult for some reason. I think I was a bit tired. So I just jumped straight to the issues log and I wrote down all the issues. And then I said what action was taken. And for some reason, then I could just see which tasks were going to be affected. And fortunately, I think, you might disagree with me, but I think these two things here, the fingerprint sensors and the problem with the self-service checkpoints not updating the customer's account, which is another, because the script had to be updated. It said that they took 4 days to rewrite the scripts here and 5 here, but I think this massive amount of extra testing time that we built in covers that. And I just said, I don't need to recalculate the dates. I don't need to add any time on. It's still going to these tasks essentially still going to finish. So, so what do I say? I think it's going to have affected installing the self-service points, right? And the security protocol one. These two tasks, I think they need to be pushed forward. I think that we've built that into software testing. So during the software testing, those things would have been picked up and fixed, right? What do you think about that? Do you agree with my answer there? Maybe you don't. That's okay. Let me know in the comments below. So I said that so I said it wasn't effective. Those things were fixed during the hardware testing time. That's why we built that in. That's why it costs so much. The only thing that I did think pushed the dates forward was the issue to do with the fibre optic cable. Someone said to me that this also would have affected the cost because you'd need to reorder the same thing again. Maybe if you justify that and explain it, they may allow that. So I said that you've got to figure out who reported these things. So I think senior software, whoever's working on that task would probably have found the issue. But I think maybe the senior software or the junior software developer for the first two. But the senior network engineer would have reported this issue with the fibre optic cable because he was the one working on installing the network infrastructure task, which was that one. That would require cabling, as well as installing the backup task, I think, as well. So I said that it was a 5-day delay here, and it would have basically meant we would have had to. There's nothing you can do about that in terms of testing, so you're just going to have to wait an extra 5 days. So I said that those tasks originally started on the 5th, so on the 5th of Feb, but because of the delay, they're going to start on the 12th, right? So that actually had a knock-on effect to some of the other tasks. So what I did was when I went through the products, I explained which product was affected, how it pushed it forward, and which ones were not affected, and I put some dates in to say when they were affected by. And yeah, so basically I tried to be as specific as possible, saying what was the knock-on effect of that on some of the other tasks as well, right? So I think if you look at the fibre optic push the start date of network infrastructure forward, yeah, and I said the junior network engineer meant that he was assigned a junior network engineer. He was assigned to work on that, pushed it forward by 5 days, and then the next task he had to do on that, which is installing CCTV, got pushed forward as well, because they had to wait for him. And then also he was also working on hardware testing, so that testing phase also got pushed forward as well. But I didn't end up going over the end of the time still, so I still managed to stay within that task. So then the checkpoint. So those are checkpoints. Have a read through that and see what you think. Quality management. I copied the quality management from my original PID, but I added in some things to talk about it a bit retrospectively, So I said about wanting staff to work on projects and not be overworked. Also, I talked about the fact that these risks that I managed because of my risk analysis, detailed risk analysis, the things that I predicted were going to go wrong did. Also, I talked about how I was glad that I did a lot of testing. We caught those issues early. The extra testing meant the dates were not affected so much. But yeah, so talking about in terms of the project checkpoint and things that got wrong, how have you managed that? And then that leads quite nicely into lessons learned. So what have I learned from this? Well, I said I felt that the junior and senior network engineer were overworked. So I get subcontractors in future. They did way more work than anyone else, and it might annoy them or tire them out, stress them out. And you don't want to annoy good employees. I felt I did assigning the staff well. So when you talk about lessons learned, it doesn't have to be, oh, I learned this because it went wrong. It can be, I did this really well and I do that again. I think it's valid to talk about things like that. So I said, assigning the staff to multiple project meant the long testing tasks were cut in half. It meant I could stay within the time frame of the budget. I also spent a lot of time considering the assumptions, constraints, and major risks to this project. I did, yeah. So, and I predicted some of those things coming up, although that didn't really help me in the end. It still delayed the project. The testing, yeah, again, I think I did we did testing well, building the extra testing time, picking up on those issues. And then I went on to discuss perhaps a thing that did go wrong that we could improve next time was the fibre optic cable. So basically, the junior network engineer was assigned that task. Now, did he order the cable? Did he make a mistake? Or did the company send us that? Well, I think in future, maybe what you need to do is have more senior engineers, which will increase the cost of the project. I did go massively under budget, so you could say that maybe I could spend a bit more money and make sure I've got higher quality. And I know some people got closer to the 350,000 than I did, but perhaps having a senior working on that task meant that the wrong things wouldn't be ordered. But then was it his fault? Maybe it was the fault of the company who sent them. Also, other things we could do, there were issues with a security software, self-service checkpoints. Maybe we should employ more rigorous testing standards, so code review each other's work, you know? So that was my checkpoint. The email, again, as I've said to you before, did a summary at the beginning, the start and end date. Now I've gone through and highlighted in bold all the things that I want Mr. Newbrook to pay attention to. When we started, when we finished, the budget. So you can see that straight away. Then here I've broken down all the tasks. So I've said, and in red I've highlighted them in bold. I said when each task started and finished, and whether or not it was affected by these issues, right? So I've gone into quite a lot of detail here. And then I've done the same, so that's for the software and the same for the hardware, showing the costs. Again, this actually took me quite a while to sort of copy those things out of the Gantt chart, but it's worth it because it looks good, I think. And then I've done the same for the testing. Right, and then my lessons learned, again, I kind of copied that, right, from my original, from this this document here. But I've highlighted the things I want him to see. So, and I don't think I need to go through this again because I've just said it, but I want Mr. Newbrook to know that I did a lot of things right, so I highlighted it. I predicted the risk, had contingency plans. I utilised the staff well, but I might have overworked them, so I want to hire subcontractors in future. I assigned the correct staff to the correct jobs, multiple staff to many longer tasks, but perhaps, but in terms of like the junior being perhaps ordering that fibre optic cable, I think we should have an investigation to find out what happened. Was it his fault? But maybe putting a more senior person in future and putting more checks from seniors on an issue like that might mean that there wasn't gonna, those issues won't come up. But then I go, you know, it's good to plants to go on about what you've done right. I considered the assumptions and risks so that these things were not going to be an issue. I also wanted a built-in extra 40 hours of software testing time and a 36 of hardware, you know, and I did it at the highest testing standards. It meant we picked up on those issues before they became really bad issues and we got them fixed and it didn't affect the deadlines. And then again, I end it in a nice way, start it in a good way, a summary, end it in a nice way in a summary. I know it's just an exam, but imagine you're writing this to me. I'll say, you did well. I hope you're happy with what we delivered. Great working with you. Hope you can be of service again. And then I signed it off. So I hope you did something similar to that. If you didn't, I'm sure that you probably did a little bit better than you think you did. And, you know, it's not the end of the world. So if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe and share it to your friends. I had a lot of good, lots and lots of views recently, so I'm really happy with that. Really makes me feel it's worthwhile doing this. So yeah, keep watching and I'll keep making videos.